And just a few logistical things here while we are waiting for a few more people. This evening, we are going to be recording the workshop. So if you do have to step away or have to duck out early, we will have it available for you um, later in the week, and we will send you that link as well, so you can access that anytime. I will share the slides with you as well. So if you want to take any notes or refer back to them later, you'll have that available. And if you're an educator, we do offer CEUs for these workshops. So again, when you get the follow-up email tomorrow from me, just respond and let me know if you would like those credits. And if you have questions throughout the workshop this evening, please use the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. Just type in questions as they pop into your head anytime, and we will do our best to answer all of those as soon as we can. And I'm going to turn it over to Ethan and Lori. Again, thanks everyone for joining us.
All right, welcome everyone to Screen Time and Media. So what we know now in considerations of the pandemic, and so this will be the topic that we have tonight. I'll introduce myself. I'll let Lori introduce herself and kind of start off with some kind of house cleaning items. So I'm Dr. Ethan Schwer. I'm Director of Diagnostics at the Groves Learning Organization in the Learning Center. And so we're gonna talk a little bit more about screen time tonight, and I'll let Lori introduce herself real quick.
Yeah, I'm Lori Kincaid. I am also a psychologist in the Learning Center.
One of the things that we wanted to highlight as we're jumping in here, I see one of the chat things, and Joanna is saying welcome to everyone. You guys can chat in or with those questions, and as Lori's talking and I see them, I might address them by typing them out, and maybe Lori, you'll do the same as you see those kind of pouring in. One of the things that I'm going to share my screen, I'm going to share our website. Groves Learning Organization is doing a little bit of a rebrand right now, and a little bit is kind of underselling it to a degree. So we are rebranding into Groves Learning Organization. And so you should be able to see my website now. Lori, you can see that, correct? On your little nod. Okay. And so we're still Groves Academy, but we're highlighting a little bit more than just our school and what we do with our rebrand, and that includes our Groves Literacy Partnerships and our Learning Center, which Lori and I are a part of. And so we have a new website, awesome colors, new emblems, and we didn't quite update our slides that highlighted that. We still have the Groves Academy, and we still are Groves Academy, but if you come to Groves Academy, the website, you'll be automatically come into Groves Learning Organization or GLO. And so you might see us referred to in the community as this, or see some pamphlets or some articles that highlight our Groves Learning Organization. So just so you know, we're talking about the same thing. We are the same as before. Just kind of a small shift in how we are referred to, and so hopefully you'll see some of this and kind of like the kind of our new look. So am I missing anything there, Lori or Joanna? Okay, so that was the house cleaning item. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Okay. All right, so talking about our agenda for tonight. Okay. So we're going to talk about what is recommended for screen time. We're going to talk about both negative and positive effects of screen time. We're going to talk about some of the considerations during the pandemic, and we're kind of in flux with this a little bit. I know that there, in many regards, there's been less isolation and more interaction. I know that there's been still waves of it going through, but so we're still going to talk a little bit about that. And there's still distance learning popping here and up. So we're going to talk about the screen time and with school and what happens during times where we might be engaging more TV or screen time. And we're going to give some good resources. Now, Laura and I both want to say that a lot of this presentation is based on as much research and scientific backed findings as we could, but we are also, Lori and I are not experts on this. Lori and I are also both parents. We understand, the draw to screen time, and even as we've gone through this, Lori and I, as we were preparing this, we said, these are things that we could be doing to better as families, and so some of these things that we're going to be talking about is just to bring that awareness to the forefront of our minds, and it might be some of those points where like, hey, I could be doing better here, or I do this well. And so we're just going to present that information and know that this isn't by any means us saying, hey, you need to do this, because there is definitely a balance here. So we will talk a lot more about screen time recommendations and strategies in general. We'll talk a little bit about that pandemic, but more of it's going to be focused on things you should be doing anyway. Okay, and we've got some good resources for you. Okay. Okay. So, anything else, Lori, for this slide? Okay. So, what is screen time? When we started looking and developing this presentation, we said, okay, so what is really considered to be screen time? What is it really defined as? And we couldn't find a universal definition, but I mean, I think it's something that is a little bit more intuitive, and I think it's anything that really involves that screen. So time watching television, playing a video game, using an electronic device with a screen, smartphone, tablet. So all of these are included with screen time. You will also consider sitting in front of your computer as being screen time. I mean, that is an electronic device with a screen. So when we talk about screen time, it's really that physical interaction with a screen.
Hi, everyone. And when we are talking about and considering these advantages and disadvantages of screen time, it can be really helpful to group it into the different types of screen time. As we may know, screen time is really not all created equal. So we really should be considering how we are using a screen when we're considering how we're managing our own time with screens and our children's time with screens. So let's talk about these different types that we can group them in. One is passive consumption. So this is things like when we are watching TV, we're scrolling on Facebook, we're scrolling on Snapchat. So we're really just being passive consumers of that content on that screen. Next, we have interactive consumption. So this is when we are interacting with the screen. So playing games, browsing the internet, those types of like looking for information that we're trying to get, those types of things. And then we have communication, so social platforms, things like Facebook, video chatting, and then content creation. So we are creating digital art, we're creating music. There's a lot of different like Minecraft games and things where children can utilize those visual spatial skills and create universes. I think it's also important to think about how these groups are not distinct concrete groups, but rather they are far more dynamic and fluid. And what I mean by that is Facebook in and of itself doesn't have to always be passive. It can also be social, or you can move across these groups depending on how you're engaging with certain types of screen time as well. So really thinking about how are we engaging with our screens and how are our children engaging with our screens is going to be important.
All right. So one of the things I didn't say from the beginning or the start is I am going to ask for a little bit of involvement. One thing I also didn't mention is you kind of expect this presentation probably to go between 8 and 8:30. if it does go on later, or like Joanna said, if you need to hop off for any reason, please feel free to do so. Know that it's recorded. Lori and I will also give our contact information. I know that the slides have already been shared, so if you have questions later on, we'd be happy to answer them. So, but one of the first parts of the involvement and just you needed, we're going to ask that you chat in some of your thoughts on this, and this might actually open up some dialogue that we're going to have even a little bit later on in our presentation. So is technology that involves screen time healthy for development? We'd like to get your thoughts on this. And kind of give your honest reaction, your honest thoughts, and see if you can use that chat function or that Q&A function. And we'll read off some of these, and we'll give a few minutes for you to kind of share your thoughts.
We have someone who said, it depends, Ethan. As with any tool, the amount of time needs to be monitored along with the type of activity. In this day and age, a child who has no screen time will surely be at a disadvantage at some point in their school years.
And I think that is a really, really good point. Okay. Okay. Depends. Some video games have an educational component. Okay. Also depends on the person. So far, some very good answers. Keep them coming. If very difficult to slow down the desire for teens to increase. Okay, and that absolutely is true. And I think you guys are already highlighting on a very important piece. And I sometimes even joke it's actually one of my favorite answers in psychology. It's our maybe, and kind of that it depends kind of falls underneath that umbrella a little bit. And I think you guys are exactly right. It really is dependent on a lot of different factors or contextual things to consider. So I think if technology is used as a more efficient tool for learning and communicating, so it can be good in a moderation, they can be okay. Okay, and there are some very positive benefits of it. And I think I talk with many of my colleagues that I'm probably not alone with this. I really do have a love-hate relationship with a lot of technology. You know, and even email is one of them. I love how fast and efficient it is, but I also hate how fast and efficient it is. Okay. I've heard screen time is bad, but is interested about the different kinds of screen time. It definitely is. So, and not all screen time is bad. There are some very positive benefits, and actually, the pandemic highlighted some positive benefits. So, thank you very much for sharing. Any other thoughts? Okay, one new message. Tweens want to outsmart their parents on screen time. Yep. Okay. Yep, that's true. Absolutely. Now, I am lucky. So I'm pretty technologically savvy, and so I'm still ahead of the curve with my kids. And so I do laugh that they can't quite keep up yet, but I know, yes, they are quick, they are witty, and they learn these things very quick. Yeah, that is very true. Okay. So let's kind of go into our answer to this question. Okay. And I don't think our answers were too far out of the realm of this. Is technology that involves screen time healthy for development? And the actual answer when they research this is nearly 4 out of 5 parents believe that technology is helpful for their child development. But I think this is also aligned with what you guys were all saying. It really depends. It can be healthy. It can be something that we need to develop and make sure that we got a careful eye on. And I think the fact of the matter is that we need to make sure that they are technological savvy, because that's what they're going to need in order to be a productive member in many aspects of our workforce and in society. And for us to kind of connect with the world, I mean, this is a very important piece. So how do we foster that in the right way? So I'm going to go over some of these guidelines for technology use, and so this is from what we gathered from different resources, and you may be familiar with some of these, maybe you're not. But what we have found is the guidelines for technology use, it is highly variable from one site to another site or from one source to another source. But these are our general rules right here. Usually before the age of 2, the recommendation is that we really are not doing any type of screen time, except for video chatting. And there's actually even some recommendations in with that. Between the ages of 2 and 5, 1 hour per day. And then once we get into 5 to 18, 2 hours a day. Okay. And there is a Harvard scholar, psychologist that says that there really is no productive benefit for screen time before the age of 2. And the thought process is that our brains are hardwired to learn language, learn emotions, and interactions. And even doing screen chatting and talking with grandma, grandpa, or someone like that, it takes a little bit of modeling and showing them how to do that, because that screen is not something that they are used to. They don't have those metacognitive skills to understand that someone is if someone not right in front of them is not actually present. So it is very difficult, and I don't know if you've I've done this with a kid, but sometimes you can kind of see that kind of sense of bewilderment from them, like what is going on here, and they can hear someone talking, they can see them moving, but they're not really there. So it is hard for them to kind of understand, and so working with them and sitting with them can be helpful for that. Talk about some things that we learned worldwide. France, Australia, Canada, they recommend no television time for those that are 3 and under. Okay, and for a large degree, I think we could say that's probably a good thing if that occurred. But there still are some benefits that we're going to get into. And there hasn't been a lot of research that have really kind of dove into this and really teased this apart really well. Most of the research has been cross-sectional. It's been hard to make some of those causal connections. Now, I'm going to go into some things that have been marketed towards kids. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Baby Einstein videos. Okay, the videos that if we put on these videos that are supposed to be highly stimulating, highly engaging, it's supposed to help make kids smarter. And some of the research that has come out has actually found that it's been more detrimental than productive, and has actually led to a higher incidences of having troubles regulating behaviors and attention. The thought process that if we put on Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, that's going to make someone smarter. There isn't a lot of research for that. So I think we do need to be very careful where they are at in the developmental period with how much screen time they are doing, because we are really meant to be social creatures, and a lot of that is from that social interaction that just naturally occurs without a screen. Um, I'm also reviewing some of my notes off on the side, so you'll see me looking off. And this is going to be dependent on what type of screens they are using and how interactive they are. I think Lori highlighted this super well. There's a big difference if I am watching, even I'm trying to think of that the puppy show. Lori can do. Okay, so you're not into that.
You thinking of Paw Patrol?
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, there's a big difference between Paw Patrol and there's a big difference between like if we start looking at Super Y. Like Super Y has those instances where they stop and they have you kind of interact even with what you are learning and doing instead of just passively watching. So these are the general recommendations. Lori, am I missing anything? I purposely waited for you to take a drink before I asked that. All right, and someone answered Paw Patrol. Thank you, Pat, for saving me there. Okay, my kids are starting to get a little older, and so we are getting into baking shows and other things like that where they do that, and they're really big into American Ninja Warrior. So, and I think this summer I'm gonna have to make an American Ninja Warrior course in my backyard, which will be fascinating. Okay. So, how much time do we spend on our screens? Okay, now some of this might be a little bit eye-opening to you. Okay. And when they studied this, is they found that American children spend about 7 hours per day in front of an electronic device. Okay. That's a lot, right? Almost a third of our day. According to the CDC, 8 to 10-year-olds spend about 6 hours per day in front of a screen. 11 to 14-year-olds spend 9 hours per day. And it goes down a little bit as you get into those later teens, from 15 to 18, about 7.5 hours. Now, this third bullet point, when I read this, I mean, this really hit me hard. And I remember even talking with Lori about this a few times. So I'm going to let this sink in just a little bit. By the age of 7, many have spent an entire year of their life in front of a screen. Right? 1 out of 7 years they've already spent in front of a screen. Now, if you even think about that even more, the general recommended amount of sleep by the time you're 7, I mean, they've almost spent another half of their life, another 3.5 years sleeping. Okay. So, I mean, there has been much less time, for a lot of other things. So you add in that 3.5 years plus a year of screen time, they've only had 2.5 years of doing other things besides screen and sleeping. A survey from the United Kingdom shows that they have an average of 3 hours a day for 3 to 4-year-olds, 4 hours a day, 5 to 7-year-olds, 4.5 for 8 and 11-year-olds. Okay, so a little bit less than what we have in the U.S. And so there are some different contextual things that are happening. Different countries do have different rates of how much they're spending time on their television. Now, conversely, so now we're talking about children, and where are they learning this from? Well, if you sit around and you say 70%, you ask children, 70% of children think that parents spend too much time on their phones. So, that's something else to be thinking, as we are preparing our kids to be appropriate consumers of technology, that's something that we may need to model for them as well. Okay. And there are very large disparities between social economic groups. Okay. So that's also something to consider. And actually, some of that actually may play as a safeguard for certain populations. So, all right, just making sure we have no more questions before we kind of move on. Okay. So we'll go into some of these negative and positive effects. So there are some definite negative effects that screen time has. So children's cognitive development can slow down in relation, with more screen time. So it is considered to be 2 years less than where it was 30 years ago with a loss of concrete and abstract thinking. And the theory is behind that is a lot of that screen time and that passive content. The more screen time you've had at 24 months, there are lower scores in behavioral, cognitive, and social areas at 36 months. Toddlers exposed to more screen time are at higher risk for expressive language delays. Okay. For every 30-minute increase for those under 2, there's a 49% increase in delays. Okay. And what really happens here is that increased screen time kind of takes away from those positive child interactions that they can have with parents and that vocabulary development and that real authentic interaction. Okay. Preschool children with more unsupervised time with electronics have lower scores on intelligence, attention, and social skills. Okay. This doesn't even just end even here, like with children. I mean, they found a lot of these effects even with adults. We found a lot of evidence that there are more increased or higher increases in traffic accidents and fatalities. Okay. There is one analysis they found for every 30 minutes of decreased screen time, it leads to a lower mortality risk, and that might lead into like not having been as sedentary and being able to up and move. And I mean, there's a lot of pieces that go into that. And there is some thought that social learning theory says that we need to curb some of the violent video games our kids are using. So in some studies, they have found that exposure to violent video games increases some of that thinking of violent behaviors. Okay, but this isn't completely clear. And as we get into some of these positive effects, you're going to hear some of these contrasting results for some of these things. Okay. It can also affect our academics, okay, and our sleep. And to me, I think this is a big one. Lori and I, we talk a lot about those positive benefits of sleep, and getting a good restful night's of sleep really sets up our brain to be functioning in the most optimal condition that it can be. And right now, I'm going to throw in a joke here because Lori's already sleep deprived and she's staying up later than she usually does to give this presentation. But joking aside, we want to make sure that we have that healthy sleep, and having more screen time inhibits the release of that natural occurring melatonin that allows us to engage into that sleep. Okay. And quite honestly, this is something that I could do a little better on. I mean, after a long day, sometimes I like to catch up on my news, and I have my phone next to me, and I'm catching up on a few things that are happening in the world. And it might be one of my only times to do that, but it is right before I go to bed. We also know that increased screen time is associated with obesity and vision problems. So now that I've talked about all of these things that are not so greatly associated with screen time, there are some really nice positive effects as well. Video games. There are a lot of positive effects for video games. Okay, they have actually been connected in small increases in reading skills, visual spatial skills. And so if you think Minecraft and your ability to manipulate and work through things and put things in right places, that can be really good for kids. Problem solving. So there's a lot of games with problem solving. And there's been a few times where I've given kids an IQ test, and some of those things look at problem solving, where I've wondered, I wonder if, they've done some video games or apps that have been like something that we administer within our tests. Building social connections. Okay, and this was highlighted greatly during our pandemic, where we couldn't meet face to face. And I was one that, I've never been such a huge fan of connecting through a video chat or something like that. But it allowed us that avenue and that way to do that when we couldn't have that in-person interaction. And that reduced a lot of isolation and a lot of loneliness for many, many people. So that is a very positive piece. Now, there are a lot of positive effects with these video games and other things. Now, we do also need to be a little bit careful with that. There are some things that are marketed that are considered brain training, that they can improve your intelligence or improve your ability to process information, your working memory, how fast you do things. And those have largely been debunked by scientific literature. Interestingly enough, even those first-person shooter games have had some positive benefits. Okay? They've been shown to help you be able to visualize things in your environment a little bit more. And there's been some research done by I think by the FBI, some of our federal bureaus and our federal organizations. They have found that there has been a decrease in violent crimes. They have coincided at the same time that there has been more of those violent video games. Okay. So on the last slide, I was talking about how there might be an increase in violent thinking and thoughts, but it doesn't always manifest into the behaviors. And so there can be a connection that maybe there is a little bit of release with these video games that might curb actual violence that could be actualized in real life. Okay. It also can be connected at sometimes with better attention and memory, and especially this is specific to geriatric populations. So those that can interact with these things and do some of these games and build some of those skills, it can help with some of that mental decline that sometimes just occurs naturally with aging. And then it can actually decrease being socially isolated. I already talked about that. Now, some of these things that we talked about, when you research TV shows, there's a phenomenon, and you can actually even Google this. It's called the Sesame Street effect. Okay. That some of these programs have been found to be very, very positive in many instances in development. Sesame Street is one of those that they have found that can actually aid in some like cognitive development, some of those early literacy skills, some of those early social skills, even being able to connect with others. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, I think that is one of those that really teaches empathy and thinking about others. They do a really good job with that. Super Y is really good with some of those basic reading skills and developing the early literacy. And a lot of what they are doing, if you watch that, is kind of based on a lot of science. So there's a lot of good things in with some of these technologies and some of this screen time. So there is the good with the bad. Okay, just make sure no questions. Okay. But now I've done a lot of talking. I think it's about time for me to hand it over to Lori. But just to give a small break, if there's any questions, make sure you write them in the chat and we'll see if we can start to address them. But I'll let Lori start going over the 4 C's.
So we in the Learning Center are often asked the question from parents, are some types of screens better than others? My child is on Minecraft, or maybe they have really strong visual spatial skills and they want to build all these structures and all of these really cool cities. Is that different than other screen time? So we can break screen time into the 4 C's, and this comes from commonsensemedia.org, which is a really awesome resource that we're going to be talking about at the end of this presentation too. And it's really critical for us as parents to think about, how is our child engaging with that content? So not only what type of content, but how are they engaging with it? What skills are they developing from it? So, number one, connection. They should be connecting on some type of personal level to what they're watching. Maybe they can identify with the characters and have a lot of empathy with them. Maybe the show really aligns with their values or their interests. Maybe they're learning more about cooking or sports or the things that they are really excited about. Second is creativity. Children's and adolescents should really be able to utilize these creative skills to be innovative. Are they able to create their own video game, create their own character, create their own songs or music, really allowing them to feel ownership of their learning? And then next is critical thinking. Are we allowing them to analyze and problem solve? Are they able to wrestle with the world's ethical dilemmas? Or maybe you're having to strategize of how do I get over this obstacle? Or maybe in a video game, you have to problem solve and figure out how to get to the other side of the world that you have created or how to build things. How are we developing some of those problem solving skills? I think we as parents oftentimes get easily sold on some of these educational programs with like question and answer type of formats, which seem educational, and they are, but they really aren't developing some of those critical analysis skills that we could also be embedding within our screen time for our kids. And then lastly, you guys, if I could star an exclamation mark anything in this presentation, it would be this, and that is context. How are we describing to our kids how media fits within their life and within their values and within their world? For younger kids, for example, we're sitting next to them when they're engaging with the screen. We're asking them questions about what they're thinking about the characters, how those characters might be feeling, what might the character do next. We're helping them make inferences, but then we're also asking them things like, well, is this real or is this not real? And how is this different than real life? And how does this make you feel? And what's bad about media and what's bad about screen time? And we're really just talking with them about how media can impact the world and them as well. Anything that you want to add to this slide, Ethan?
No, I always got to remember to unmute myself. Lori, if you want to open up, let's see if we can team this question together. If you open up the Q&A, and I think there's a really, really good question that I think we can address as before we kind of move on to that next slide. And it is something that we all probably grapple with to some degree. So Michelle asked, thanks for the recommendations for the healthy TV shows. What are we supposed to substitute screen time with? Something that doesn't, require parent involvement, but, we're time strapped. Absolutely, Michelle. And I hear you, I feel you. And Lori's the same way. So we are both parents. I've got 4 children myself. And quite honestly, I will be the first to admit that I have used screen time to essentially babysit my kids at certain times. I need to go mow the lawn. I need to change the laundry. I need to keep them busy for just a little bit. What can I do? So, but sometimes it's not the question of what do we substitute with? Do we make sure that we have those healthy things there that we can kind of keep them engaged and then just kind of be within the parameters? And it is okay. Like if there is a day or there's something where I can't, we don't need to be sticking to this 2 hours every day. We don't need to be like, oh, I went over 2 hours. That's not what we're saying. But, are there other things that you can do? My kids, when I was growing up, we built a lot of toy train tracks and get them set up, get them start working on that and see if I can go do something else, anything else that they might be interested in. And it is all different. I know that with my daughters, I can give them arts and crafts and they will color things. And my boys just want to watch YouTube. So it is, I hear the challenge. And then especially if you don't have a backyard or outdoor space. Um, so, um, you know, one thing is I think you could substitute, and we do make this a rule in my house, is they need to have at least 30 minutes to 45 minutes a day of reading. And that's a rule that we set forth. That's a very healthy thing for them. And I think that is probably a good substitution. Lori, would you have anything to add or how you would tackle that?
No, I will just echo what you said, Ethan, that I think some of the earlier stats that we share, they can sound scary. 30 minutes of extra screen time is impacting all of these different outcomes. And it's not meant to be scary. And we totally understand what that sounds like of, oh my gosh, if my child has an extra 30 minutes of screen time a day, I'm setting them up for success. And that's just not the case. What this is all about moderation. And I couldn't agree with you more, Ethan, that I think for me, it's less about substitution and more that the yin to the yang, the yang is set up as well. All of those amazing, healthy interactions with peers, healthy interactions with you as parents, doing fun activities, as long as that is there, I'm a lot less worried about development. And then let's try to, at the forefront of our mind as parents, also think about if we are giving them a screen, what types of screen time are they having and how are they engaging with it, and making sure that we're doing that the best that we can. Outside of that, the only other recommendations I can think of is just getting them out of the house, getting them, hooked up with early childhood activities, getting them hooked up with extracurricular stuff at school, because if they're engaged with all of those things, hopefully they're not craving a screen, and then they're having those positive interactions as well. But I know that that's hard, right? Like, to drive to and from activities, like, we as parents are busy. So like, I get it and know that Ethan and I are in the same boat.
All right, I'll get you on to the next slide there, Lori.
Yeah.
And keep those questions coming. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And the last point that I made on the last slide was about context. And I don't think that we could talk about our world and values and media in our world without talking about social media. I think the biggest area of media where we need to talk about it with our kids as well is with all of these social platforms. So when we think about this as part of our everyday life, this is something that can create a lot of anxiety for parents. Should my kids be on these different social media platforms? There are a lot of positive aspects to them. And I think that we need to absolutely consider those positive aspects, but also consider the negative aspects as well. So let's talk about some of the negatives first. So first, as parents, thinking about bullying. So back in the day, before some of these social media platforms existed, if kids were bullied within the four walls of a school, they could go home to their safe place with their parents and their siblings and escape it. Where in today's world, it becomes a lot more challenging to escape, which can create learned helplessness and can be really challenging for kiddos. My little sister especially was getting group texted from girls and getting bullied that way and on Snapchat, and she felt like she truly couldn't escape it. So as parents, really understanding, looking at their privacy settings, looking at who they're engaging with, making sure that we are part of their social media experience until they have the maturity to be able to handle it independently. Next is sexting. This is a platform where vulnerable individuals, including our kiddos, can be victims to a lot of nasty things out there. So making sure, again, that we as parents don't need to be scared of it, but just aware of it, and making sure that we're monitoring when our children are young enough to still be vulnerable to some of those situations. Next is what I like to call FOMO. I don't know how many of you have heard of this, but fear of missing out. So I think a lot of us realize that we are only posting our best selves on social media. And we as adults realize that that's kind of what social media is for. But a lot of times kids aren't understanding. This is kind of that context question, that in their general world, they're thinking that social media, that is everyone else's life. And well, why didn't I get invited to that thing? And why, like, these people seem a lot happier than me, and these people seem like they have a lot more friends than me. So having open and honest and direct conversations with our kiddos about just that, this is kind of what people use social media for. It doesn't mean that you're missing out on anything. You can reach out to those people and ask them. And then also that goes with this idea of this identification of self-worth. And I think a lot of our adolescents and pre-adolescents are attaching their value as a person to what they are able to post on social media, the pictures that they post, how many likes they get, how many comments they get. So having open and honest conversations with our children about your worth as a person has nothing to do with social media. That is just one dimension here where you are able to manifest some of your values and things that matter to you, but your worth is not at all associated with that. And just talking with kiddos about that, because I know that's something that has come up with a lot of adolescents that we've worked with. Next is fake news. So, how do we teach our children about how we find good evidence-based news and how do we filter out the bad stuff? Because a lot of our kids are not getting news from the news sources that we get news. They are scrolling Facebook and seeing all of the things that are streaming on their Facebook, which we all know is based on algorithms of things, of what they determine that that child needs to see. So, how do we help them get access to things to help their knowledge about the world? And then lastly is geotagging and sharing locations. So Ethan, you'll have to chime in a little bit at the end of this because I know that you added this one. And back in the day, if I'm remembering correctly, Ethan, you said that Facebook automatically tagged pictures of your location, where now it gives you the option. But this is just something to talk to our kids about of if it has an option to share your location, maybe that's not the best safe way to showcase yourself on social media, and just talking about the advantages and disadvantages of that, especially if you're up at the cabin, if you're on vacation, people don't need to know where you are. It's just not really creating that safe space. Did I cover what you wanted me to for geotagging, Ethan?
Yeah, I think yes, and just to make sure that you check that privacy, and that's a privacy setting in your phone. And I think most of them by default now come to geotagging turned off. But when you take pictures, it can include like your GPS coordinates. And I think most of these platforms now, like even if you upload it to them, it does delete the geographic location of that photo, even if you did have the geotagging on in your phone. So I think there are some protective things there, but it is still something to be very, something that you consider and kind of look for, watchful and be vigilant of. So.
Yeah. So with this, I mean, we all obviously know the positive aspects of this, and that's going to be the social interactions with friends and with family who we are not going to be able to see face to face. But with that, just some common tips that kind of overview everything that I just talked about for managing social media use. Number one, look at their privacy settings. Number two, sharing access of their accounts until they are mature and independent enough to handle it on their own. See who they are interacting with, especially if you think they're getting bullied, making sure that you can help them navigate those relationships if needed. Talk to them about how their posts may affect them later in life. We didn't have to worry about this when we were young kids of if you post something now, even if it gets deleted, someone might have screenshotted that. If you said something offensive, someone could hold that against you later on. And then that most important comment of talking about how social media fits within their greater life and their values and their identity as a person. So those are our kind of tips for managing social media. I'll hand it back to you, Ethan.
Yep, muted again. All right, ways to decrease screen time. so these are some practical solutions that you can use. And I'm actually even going to show you something at the very end that we have used, and some of the families that we've talked to before have asked for this. But one, charge devices in parents' rooms at night or in a location that's outside of their room. I mean, the devices should not be in their room unless they're doing homework during the day. So there should be certain times at night where electronics are out. Personally, and this is a personal conviction of mine, and there is some research support with this too, but really there should also be no TVs in the bedroom. The general consensus, even when we're talking about sleep, is that your bedroom is really meant for sleep, and try to take anything else that could interrupt that out of that room. Use applications to limit your screen time. So a lot of our phones now have some of these safety features built in that will allow you to do that. You can also download these apps to help you limit your kids' screen time. So my kids, we just started to venture into the time where my two oldest kids have phones now. And so we are able to limit how much time that they are able to use their phone every day, okay? Electronic TV monitoring devices. So anything that we can do to help monitor what they are watching and how much they're doing it. You can use contingent feedback systems, clinic-based counseling. Make sure that we are getting screen breaks in. 5-minute warnings. So using visual timers and say, this is how much time you have left with your screen time. In our household, we do keep it at a 2-hour screen time max. And so these are some things that we do in our house. They get 2 hours per day, but that does change a little bit on the weekends. There's a little bit more flexibility for them on the weekends, and they're not allowed to watch any television in the mornings, and they are not allowed any video games during the academic week. Like I said, we just ventured into letting our kids have cell phones. And I heard someone talk before, and I'm going to share my screen so you're going to get to see what I am talking about. So you're going to see the Groves Learning Organization website. Now you should see the contract. There's a contract pulled up, Lori, you can see that. Okay. So we ventured into having our kids have phones, and someone once said, having a phone, that is our privilege and not a right. And that's how we entered in this with our kids. And this was kind of like from our parenting philosophy, this is what we used. And so they had to sign this contract, and this is what they had to sign off on. And if you want a copy of this, I'd be happy to share this with Joanna so that she can share this with you. But you can also go onto Google and look at phone contracts. There's many contracts that are out there. And this kind of gets into that safe and responsible piece that we've been talking about. We tell our kids that they need to be responsible with their phone. That if they see anything that they see anything that's inappropriate, that they need to tell us. They have to ask before downloading any apps or games or ringtones. And actually, we've got an app that they can't download anything without our permission. One of the things that one of them that's been a discussion point a few points is when we call or text them that they need to answer us. So that's something that we've been working on with them, and that hasn't always happened with our kids. But we also talk about our social media. So we don't allow our kids to have any social media on their phones. They are still too young for that in our eyes. And we can always look at their phones and see what they're texting and new contacts that they're having. And we do peruse that from time to time to make sure that things are being healthy. And for the most part, they are. And to a large degree, we also think that, this has actually helped them connect with a lot of other peers their age too. So, so there are some positive things to this. I'm seeing some items from the contract. Okay,
People
all right,
just
the
asked for it,
contract,
Ethan. Yeah.
and it's already shared. Look at that. So in order for them to get their phone, they actually had to sign and date this. And if they don't live up to their contract, guess what? Their phone is gone. It's really that simple. And we've done this from the onset, and we've had a couple of bumps in the road, but I would say for the most part, our kids have done really, really well with their phones. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. All right, anything else that you would add on that last slide, Lori? Okay. Considerations during the pandemic. Good. And I kind of, in my notes, I said, this is a little bit of a tricky topic, okay? In the pandemic, I mean, what else can you do sometimes? And I know a lot of families watch a lot more Netflix, and I think our family was in that boat as well. And there has been a significant increase in phone usage, screen time during the pandemic. And part of this is they're even doing distance learning on their computers, on their screens all day. And this is where it does get very important to make sure that we take those designated breaks from screen and say build in some of those times where we can do something else besides the screen, play a board game together, bake cookies together, something like that, where you take those breaks where it's you create that interaction and you're not just in front of a screen. So, but within the consideration that, this can help shield from some of those negative effects from the pandemic as well. It can help decrease some of the isolation. I know that our kids were, I think there was like a Facebook Messenger for kids that they were using with other kids their age, and they found that to be fun and engaging. And I thought it was really weird because all they ever did was all talk at the same time, and you couldn't really tell, but maybe that's what they do when they're together anyways. But so there are some benefits, and so if we do go into this pandemic where we shut things down again, just kind of take a step back and say, how can I balance this the best that I can? And I think that's the way that you can do this is just let's do the best that we can with what we have, and try to take breaks when we can. Now I'm going to let Lori show you. So we got resources, but Lori found an excellent resource for you.
So Ethan and I at the end of our slides also have a list of all the references. So if you want the actual research that is behind a lot of the stats that we shared with you, you can have that as well. And then we also debated about all these different resources that we could share with you. And we ended up landing on just one. We wanted to make it easy. We wanted to give you a one-stop shop of where you could go to find information, more information about screen time, and really good evidence-based recommendations for that. So I'm about to show you how lack of technology savvy I am. Ethan is by far the better one out of two of us. Ethan, what is this little box thing called?
As you say, I'm a little more technology savvy. I keep forgetting to unclick my mute button. I just keep talking. QR code.
QR code. So if you hold your camera up to this QR code, it'll automatically bring you to this website. And what it is, it's commonsensemedia.org/scream-time. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you to bring us over to that website. Can you see that now, Ethan? You're muted. Okay, perfect. Okay, so what Common Sense Media gives you as parents, if we're looking at the screen time specifically, is a parents need to know tab. And within this tab, I want to show you all of the awesome resources within this. First, you can look for information by age. So if you have a child who is a preschooler, who is a big kid, who is a tween, who is a teen, you can click directly into that category and they will have age-specific recommendations for you. How to set controls on Xbox, 5 ways video games can help kids with special needs, a lot of different awesome things there first. But then you can also look it up by topic. So Ethan was talking about cell phones. If you want more information about cell phones for teens and what you can do, there are specific questions that other parents have asked as well, but they've already pre-answered for you based on the research. Same thing with if you have questions about screen time. We have a lot of content from this presentation from this area specifically. Questions about social media. Ethan and I talked a lot about privacy settings. How do you set those up on different social media accounts for our kids? Learning with technology. We talked a little bit about violence and what is the research showing in regards to violence in the media and how that's impacting our kids and our kids' development. There's a whole host of research on that within that category as well. And then you can also look up categories. This is, I think, more so for me, based on your parents' guide to all these things that kids are doing these days. So if you're like, wait, TikTok, Roblox, I haven't even heard of those things, but like my kid is talking about it. If you want like a little parent, info sesh about what some of these things are that our kids are engaging with, it'll tell you, here are the things that you should consider. Fortnite, for example. A lot of our kids are gung-ho about Fortnite. So it talks about, well, what is it? Why are my kids so interested in it? Is it appropriate? Is it too violent? All of these questions that I know parents are asking themselves and how they should parent their kids with Fortnite. So that's just one example, but there's a lot of other, your parent ultimate guide to all of these things that our kids might be doing. And then lastly, there are actual, agreements and articles and webinars, so many other things that back up what they are saying in this website as well. So if you're like, I don't really want to just hear your recommendations, I'd rather read the research myself, you can go to our list of all of our research articles that we found, or you can go here as well and read it yourself. Anything else about this website, Ethan, that you wanted to make sure that I highlighted?
No, I think it's a fabulous website. When Lori stumbled across this and showed us, it was like, yep, this is what we need. So, okay, so share the screen for the presentation again. And then as you're going through that website, Lori, I was like, what is a microtransaction? So for Fortnite, so I might go look at that. All right, let's see the chat. So any questions? So we have reached the end. We have gotten done a little earlier than expected. So any questions? We'll stay on here for a few more minutes and see if we can answer any questions, but we also have our contact information here at the bottom of this slide, so you can always reach out and ask us questions.
And again, if we do have any educators out in the group this evening, just look in your email tomorrow evening. You'll get an email from me that has a link to our resources as well as my contact information. So if you do want those credits, just let me know. Happy to do that. And again, we will share the link for the recording as well.